And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. We'll start by just taking a quick look at the warnings map, and you can see how much this has changed from last week. Remember, towards the end of last week, there was almost nothing on this warnings map. The wild weather had left the United States. Well, as you can see, it's going to start to return here in the next 24 to 48 hours, and it's going to first come in on the west. It's going to come through California and actually bring some much needed rain and snow, but you can see that's causing some winter storm warnings stretching all the way through the northern California mountains, through the Sierras, all the way down into southern California. And then after that moves through, it's going to bring what looks to be like a major storm to the center of the country. Places in Nebraska, Colorado, Wyoming are expected to get over a foot of snow, and some places looking like they could get over 2 feet of snow. And then down where the temperatures are warmer, places like Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, that's where we're going to start to see some heavy rain. And although we're not seeing that many flood warnings on this map yet, I'm expecting to see those start to pop up in the next couple of days as that storm moves through California and into the center of the country. And one other thing you'll notice on this map, we do have some winter storm warnings up here in Wyoming right now. That's actually part of a little system that moved through California yesterday. Parts of very northern California got some rain. Now that's moving its way up into the Midwest. That's not the big storm that we're going to be talking about today. The big storm we're talking about is currently moving through California and then will be stalling out over the middle of the country. That's basically what we're going to be talking about all day today. And if you want to actually see that, we could take a look at the precipitation map. Right there, you can see that little blast we were just looking at where there's the winter storm warning in Wyoming. That one's going to move up into the Midwest and bring some snow and some rain up there. For the most part, it's going to be rain because many locations in the Midwest are 25 to 30 degrees above average, but places in Minnesota will pick up some snow with that one. Now, that's not the key system we're watching. The one we're watching, you can see that rain start to show up. This is early this morning, and then it starts to fill into Northern California, and then eventually it's totally over California. Almost all of California from NorCal to SoCal getting some rain and snow as that finally moves off and into the center of the country. Now, this is the key thing we're going to be watching for the rest of the week, as this looks to be taking place Friday into Saturday and Sunday, where the storm, instead of just continuing to move off through the country, just stalls out right over Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado. It just stalls out right there and then just continues to pull in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. And you can see how strong this storm appears to be getting as we get into this weekend. That's going to continue what seems to be Friday, Saturday, into Sunday, even into Monday. Those same areas are still picking up heavy snowfall throughout Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming, and then heavy rainfall throughout Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. So that's where we're going to pick up some large totals in the areas where it's cold enough to get snowfall, and then some large rainfall totals where you can see persistent heavy rain showers and what will likely be some thunderstorms as well. Then eventually, that's going to move up to the Midwest. That's actually the big change in the weather forecast from yesterday. As of right now, it doesn't look like that one's going to bring all that much to the Midwest. There's a couple little periods where we're getting some light snowfall, but as you'll see in a minute, the bulk of that actually gets reabsorbed into another system that looks to be doing the exact same thing towards the start of next week. So that's a ways off in the forecast. We'll just have to wait and see what actually happens there. If we want to actually look at where the precipitation is going to fall, we'll just click through here. You can ignore some of the northern states with this. That'll mostly be snowfall, so we'll look at the snowfall in a second. For this, it's just helpful to see where that heavy rainfall is going to be produced. Right along the Washington, Oregon, California coast, it looks like we're picking up an inch, maybe an inch and a half, especially up there on the California-Oregon border. But the clear bullseye on this map, where we have the largest amount of rainfall accumulating, is right where that storm stalls out over the center of the country. Right in Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, that's where we're picking up maybe 3 to 4, even 5 inches of rain within the next week. And again, it's all because of that storm that's moving through California right now. So we're going to be certainly diving into the local maps for Northern California and Southern California. It's not as much as we're going to be getting in other parts of the country, but I would say it's needed more than other parts of the country. So we'll definitely be taking a close look at the totals we'll be getting in California, and then we'll also be taking a close look at the rainfall that you can see has the potential to cause some flooding. There's no flood threats on the warnings map yet, so I don't want to jump the gun saying there's for sure going to be flooding, but if you're getting 4 to 5 inches of rain in these parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas, that's a lot of rain. Your soils can't absorb all that. That's where they get saturated. That's where some of the streams start to overflow. So that is one part of the story that I imagine we're going to be talking about for the rest of this week. And then when we look at the snowfall, there's that first little blast that we were looking at earlier on the precipitation map that's bringing that winter storm warning to Wyoming. And then that's going to stretch up into the Midwest. And there are some places in Minnesota and parts of South Dakota that will be getting maybe 6 to 8 inches of snow with that one. So that is something to think about. It's just not very widespread. You can see it's just one quick strip that goes through there and then up into Canada. Now, meanwhile, down here in California, we're getting a foot to maybe I was going to say 2 feet of snow, but it looks like that's just one little bullseye that gets 2 feet of snow. Throughout the Sierras, though, safe to say we're getting a foot of snow with that storm as it starts to move through today. It's almost 2 waves. Part of it moved through yesterday. That's the one that's now up in Wyoming. And then the next little blast of it is coming through today. And the next blast looks to be the bigger of the 2. So that's where we're going to actually start to pick up some good totals throughout the Sierras. You can see Nevada, Utah, Colorado also picking up some snow as this system moves through. And then right about here on the map, as we get into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, this is where you're going to see areas around Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming really start to add on the snowfall totals. This is right before that storm starts to stall out over the center of the country. And the big thing it's doing there, it's pulling lots of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, while at the same time it's pulling down cold air from Canada. I have a map that shows that perfectly later in the video. But what that's doing is allowing, I'll just click through here, all that snow to fall. You can see what that is. I haven't looked at the winter storm severity index yet for that, but I'd imagine once that shows up, the winter storm severity index only goes out 3 days, so it wouldn't really be interesting to look at yet. But on Thursday and Friday, I'll be sure to pull it up because I would imagine they're going to categorize this as a major to possibly even extreme storm, as we're expected to get over a foot throughout almost all of Colorado. And then there's some places that look to be picking up 1.5 feet, maybe even 2 feet of snow. This is actually looking stronger than it was looking yesterday. For the exact reasons for that, we'll just find out later in this video. But where it's not stronger is once it moves up into the Midwest. Once it moves up into the Midwest, it's only going to add maybe another inch or 2 to parts of Minnesota. One change from the models is now it's expected to bring some snow to Michigan. That's different from yesterday. Again, we'll just have to see what our temperatures are doing when that actually happens to see if we get that. But overall, that is quite a bullseye of large snow accumulation. So this is certainly a storm that we're going to be following throughout this week. Now, another aspect of this storm as it moves through are the high winds. You can see those starting to pick up tonight into early tomorrow morning, especially throughout Southern California, Arizona, and New Mexico, as that storm dips down and then starts its movement into the center of the country. It's going to be bringing these 30 to 40, maybe even 50 mile per hour wind gusts with it. And then what that's going to do, once that moves into where the storm starts to settle in over the center of the country, that's actually at first going to cause some fire dangers. So before it starts to bring in all that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, before it's dropping the heavy rain and the heavy snow, it's actually going to lead to some fire danger, especially in New Mexico, Texas, and then also earlier in Arizona with these 40 to possibly 45, 50 mile per hour wind gusts. That is causing a fire threat that we're going to look at later in this video. A red flag warning is already in place throughout that region. And then you can see those winds as it moves up into the Midwest is going to bring some of those 50 mile per hour wind gusts up there. And then right about Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, that's where it starts to reform in the center of the country. It looks like some of those wind gusts are going to be returning. At this point, I would expect the fire threat to be diminished because at this point we will have picked up some rainfall and some moisture will have moved into this area. But that is still something to think about with this storm. Saturday, Sunday, into Monday, expecting some 50 mile per hour wind gusts with that storm as it sits over the center of the country. So this map will just perfectly explain what's going on. Here you can see that trough going into California. It actually started yesterday, but it's really going to start to pick up throughout the day, today and tomorrow. As you see, it almost turns into this giant cutoff low that sits over California throughout today, Wednesday, Thursday, and then slowly works its way down directly over Southern California. Now, the key thing that I think to think about on this map is how close these isobars are together, the lines of constant pressure. When they're rather far apart, like what you see currently over much of California, that means it's not all that extreme of a storm. You might get some light rain and some light snow, but it's not going to be anything extreme. Now, where you see these lines start to get closer together down here over Southern California, that's where you start to get a stronger storm. That's where you're going to have more energy with the system. So that's why we have those high wind warnings and some of those 40 mile per hour gusts going down here into Southern California, Arizona, and New Mexico. That's where the isobars are closer together. You can think of that almost just as a gradient. Right here, it's much higher up. Down here, it's very low. So it's a steep gradient where these lines are closer together, which means the winds are going to be flowing faster. Right over here, over Northern California, as we get into Thursday, that's about as wide as you're ever going to see these isobars. So even though we might be getting some light rain and snow, doesn't seem that there's going to be all that much wind with it. And then watch as this continues to move off into the center of the country. That's where it just sits there. It's a pretty interesting map to look at because you don't often see one like this where it almost looks like there's a giant ridge stretching all the way up into Canada, but then within that ridge, there's this rather large cutoff low. And at this point, that's where it's pulling in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. You think about it, it's moving counterclockwise. So on the right side, it's pulling this moisture in. That's where we get the heavy rain throughout Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas. And then on the left side, you think it'd be pulling, you can actually see the wind barbs if you look very closely. That's where it's pulling this cold air down. So where that moisture and cold air meet, that's where we're getting that heavy snowfall, especially throughout Colorado and Nebraska, where a foot to maybe even 2 feet are expected. And then here's the really interesting part of this. One, as it starts to move up to the Midwest, you'll notice that much of the Midwest is actually, for the most part, under this overall ridge. So a lot of the temperatures up here are still rather warm. So that's going to limit where that snowfall is able to fall. The second thing to notice is it doesn't just move off into Canada like it was showing yesterday. Now it actually looks like it's going to be reabsorbed into this next system. What happens after that is going to be very interesting to see. But just looking at this map right now, you'll notice a pretty clearly defined split halfway across the country. In the west, we have this large trough building in. That's the storm moving in. And then throughout the center and working into the eastern parts of the country, we have this large ridge. So what that's doing is affecting our temperatures, and especially up in the Midwest and places like North Dakota and South Dakota, you can see these temperatures are 25 to 30, even 40 degrees above average because of that large ridge. So that is going to have a major impact on all the snowfall you're getting. Remember that first little system that's actually moving through right now? As that moves through, you'll notice that much of the Midwest is still well above average temperatures, especially down here in Wisconsin, Iowa, 25 to 30 degrees above average. So that's why that first system is only going to be able to bring that narrow strip of snow, because farther east and further into the Midwest, we're 30 degrees above average, well above freezing, and well above the temperature where you're able to pick up any snow. And then as that continues right there, you think the low is right over Minnesota at this point. And you can actually see it's almost perfectly follows the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin, where Wisconsin is 30 to 40 degrees above average. They're just going to be getting rain at this point, whereas Minnesota, still above average temperatures, but more mild. So that's where Minnesota will be able to pick up some snow with that first system. And then as we continue to click through into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you'll notice where that cold air was being pulled down by the low pressure system. Actually, this map shows it perfectly. At this point, you can think the low is right above Kansas. The way you can tell that is right here in this almost wave-shaped area of above average temperatures. You think that's where these warm temperatures are being pulled from the Gulf of Mexico into that low pressure system. So as they're pulled from the Gulf of Mexico, they bring above average temperatures to many of the states throughout the southeast. Now on the flip side, on the left and upper part of this low, that's where your winds are flowing down from places like Montana and North Dakota. That's where you're bringing in these cold temperatures where it's 25 to 30 degrees below average. So it's interesting to see that contrast right around the low. Where you have the warmer temperatures is where we're going to be getting that heavy rain. Where you have the colder temperatures, that's where we're getting maybe a foot to 2 feet of snow right there. That was actually a graphic I hadn't noticed when I was clicking through these maps earlier, but it's very interesting because that perfectly shows how this is going to work. Now, one other thing, as you continue to click through there, you'll notice the Midwest stays above average for most of that period. There's maybe some short time spans where the temperatures get a little mild, but for the most part it's above average. So that's what's affecting the snowfall totals up in the Midwest. And that's something we'll be looking at closely when we get into the local regions of this forecast. So as we click through here, one thing you'll notice is just how warm the Midwest is. There's places throughout. There's actually some areas where right about there, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota are in the low 60s. That's actually similar temperatures that's actually warmer than some areas of Arizona and New Mexico. That's rather interesting to see, especially this time of year when those states are typically so cold. That just gives you an idea of how warm it is up there. 30 to 40 degrees above average in the 60s throughout the day today. And then you'll notice right about there, that's where we start to see that split. And that first low pressure system moves through the Midwest. You'll notice where those blue colors are, that's where it's below freezing. That's where you're able to pick up some snowfall as that first system moves through. But notice much of the Midwest is in the 60s as that moves through. So those states are not going to be able to get any snowfall as that first system goes through. Now you'll also notice California and much of the northwestern half of the United States is in that below freezing and colder category. That's why as that storm moves through California today, Wednesday, and Thursday, that's why we're going to be able to pick up so much snow throughout the Sierras, Northern California mountains, and even all the way down into SoCal, where you see some of those below freezing temperatures. That's great news when it comes to the snowfall. Maybe not great news if you don't like cold weather, but California is in a drought and we're already starting to think about fire danger. So seeing a storm come through and able to add some more snowpack to our mountains, which is where we get a lot of our water, that's some good news there. And then let's just click through into Saturday and Sunday and see if we can see that perfect contrast where that low is directly over Kansas. This is almost the mirror image of what we're looking at on the anomalies map. You see that strip of warm temperatures flowing into the low where we're in the 60s, maybe even the 70s at some points. And then on the left side of that low, that's where we're bringing down those cold temperatures, parts of Colorado could be in the teens to maybe even below 0. When you start to see those purple colors, that's where you're getting into the single digits to possibly even 0. So that's, again, why we're going to be getting so much snow in Colorado with that storm. So just taking another look at the warnings map, this paints the picture of what we've already been talking about. We've got those winter storm warnings in California, the red flag warnings throughout New Mexico, Texas, Kansas, even Colorado. That's before all that moisture and cold air moves in. Before it moves in, the winds are going to be the first thing to hit this area while there's still relatively low relative humidity and a lot of the fuels are still dry. Obviously, that's going to change later in the week when we start to get all this heavy rainfall and snowfall and cold temperatures. But before that happens, we do have that red flag warning and fire threat through those states. And then you also notice the winter storm warning in Wyoming. That one's stretching up into the Midwest. And you'll notice it's very north. Much of the Midwest is where we're just getting that rainfall. And you can actually see some of those slight flood risks along some of the streams and rivers throughout this area. And that is a good indication that your temperatures are warm and you're going to be getting rain instead of the snow like we're going to be seeing in Minnesota. So I think a good way to go about the rest of this video is to start from the west and move our way east. Just track this storm as it moves across the country. It first goes through California, then it dips down, brings some fire danger, then it brings that heavy snow and rain, and then it moves up into the Midwest. So we're just going to follow the path of this storm as it moves across the country. So it makes sense that we'll start here in California, where again, we have those winter weather advisories stretching all the way from the Oregon border down to the Mexico border. And again, that's because our temperatures are relatively cold, so that's where we're able to pick up decent amounts of snowfall all the way from NorCal to SoCal. Seeing this on the overall pattern map, you can see this trough already starting to build into California. It started yesterday in very northern parts of California, but it was very isolated rain there. This next wave that comes through is going to be much more widespread for who gets the rain. Right there, that's that giant low that's just going to be slowly moving across the state. And I'll actually back it up so you can see that again. This is really started yesterday, and it's just building in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then it's not really gone until Sunday. So I would say the theme for this storm is there's no periods where it seems like a really intense storm. It doesn't seem like it's going to be 5 inches of rain or 5 feet of snow. As you can see by how far apart those isobars are, not all that strong of a storm, but the fact that it's moving so slowly is going to allow us to actually pick up some decent totals, maybe an inch of rain along the coast and over a foot of snow in the mountains. Now again, obviously we would like this to be a bigger storm, but we'll take what we can get. I wouldn't call this an atmospheric river by any chance. It just seems like a very weak but slow moving storm that eventually moves off on Sunday. Now the one spot that doesn't look all that weak is down here in Southern California, where you start to see those isobars get a little bit closer together. That's where we're actually going to get some more moisture pushing in, which means we could get some heavier rain down there and some larger winds, maybe getting some gusts up to 35 to 40 miles per hour. So we'll take a look at that as well. So as you can see, last night and early this morning, this was already starting to bring some rain and snow to NorCal. And then as we click through the day today into tonight and early tomorrow morning, that's where some of that rain and snow is going to fill in throughout the entire state. And then you'll notice as I click through here, there's some periods where we're getting moderate rainfall and moderate snowfall. You can tell by the dark greens or the dark blues. But again, it's not yellow or orange rainfall. That's where you're getting 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour. With some of the storm, that one big atmospheric river we had earlier this year, there were large periods of time where we're getting orange rainfall. This looks like moderate. And then it's also moderate snowfall, not looking like it's those purples that we've seen with some of our storms, just these dark blues up there, which indicates 0.1 inches per hour. But the one thing about this, as I was saying, it lasts for a long time and it's widespread, which is actually, I would say, good news. When you get a large amount of totals in one select location, that's where you get property damage, flooding, just bad things. Where you're spreading out where you're spreading out light precipitation, but for a long period of time, that's the kind of storm that really helps with the drought, and it doesn't lead, or it shouldn't lead to as big of damages because it's just lightly adding up to your totals. It's the difference of just a quick force or just slowly adding up. Hopefully that made some kind of sense. So clicking through there, you can see that light rain and snow will be continuing all the way into Saturday for the especially Southern California, before it moves off into Nevada, Utah, Colorado. So that's one thing that I've kind of been ignoring on this map, but a lot of this snow and rain is also going to be spreading throughout this region into Nevada, Utah, Colorado, getting, for the most part, snow in those regions. So when we look at the totals map, we'll look at those closely when it comes to the snow. When it comes to the rain, that is mostly going to be on the coast of California, where there are stretches where we're able to get an inch. I would say I'm a little hesitant to get too excited about this storm because in the last 3 model runs, every time I look at it, some of the totals, especially up here in NorCal, seem to be being reduced. But down here in SoCal, where again we saw the tighter isobars, the stronger part of the storm, that's where we have a lot more energy and moisture being pushed in. That's where some of our totals look to be over an inch to maybe even an inch and a half. So that is, I think, the most interesting thing to look at on this map, as it perfectly goes along with those winds and moisture that'll be being pushed from Los Angeles into San Diego. So I would say that's the best news when it comes to this map, because a lot of the fuels down in this area are still critically dry, and there haven't been very many big storms this year. So it's good to see large parts of SoCal will be picking up an inch. And then when we look at the snowfall, this is where we'll look at the broader region. Obviously, in parts of Northern California, there's that bullseye where we get over a foot to possibly 2 feet. And then throughout the Sierras, looks like we're about 1.5 feet. And then down here in Southern California, there are some areas that look to be picking up 6 inches to even maybe a foot of snow right there in that bullseye as well. Now, what's good news to see on this map is a lot of that precipitation isn't just all being dumped on California, it's being spread throughout the region. Large parts of Nevada will be getting 2 to 4 inches of snow, some locations getting 6, while parts of Utah, 3 to 6 inches of snow, and then there's the bullseye in Arizona that could be picking up a foot of snow. And then there you can see all the action going on in Colorado, but we'll get to that later in the forecast. So again, all of that widespread precipitation is good news for this reason. This is showing the drought that we're currently in. As you can see, California is still abnormally dry to even severe drought, but then parts of Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado are actually in severe to exceptional drought. So that's why it's good to see all that moisture get spread out throughout the broad region. And then, even though Southern California doesn't look to be in a worse drought, that's where the fuels are more critically dry than up here in NorCal. So that's why I'm especially happy to see a lot of that precipitation falling between Los Angeles and San Diego. Now, that was a lot of good news when it comes to California and Nevada and Utah and the drought in general. Where there is some bad news, I would say there's 2 things. One, I know I'm getting excited about this storm, but it's not actually that big of a storm. We're getting maybe an inch along the coast, and the snowfall is going to be good. Maybe a foot and a half to possibly even 2 feet of snow with this. But overall, it's not one of those large atmospheric rivers where we pick up 10 to 15 inches of rain, the kinds of storms that really help when it comes to our water supply and drought. It's something. It's a small storm coming in, but it's slowly moving, so we will get some decent totals with it. Now, that right there it's hard to call that bad news because it's at least a storm, but it's certainly not bringing large totals, And then here's the other bad news. As we look at the 6 to 10 day forecast, which is the average 6 to 10 days out, from March 14th to March 18th, it looks like we're going to be shifting back to a dry pattern throughout the west. So what I'm hoping is this storm overperforms. We end up getting much more rain and snow than was originally predicted, because it doesn't look like there's many storms on the horizon. Now, the good news, I don't want to leave you thinking this is all just bad. The good news is weather forecasts are certainly subject to change, as I talk about every single day when we talk about the changes in the forecast. So this itself could change. Maybe 6 to 10 days out, this map is wrong and we end up getting another storm. It's pretty hard to say this far out, but as of right now, that is what it's saying. So the other thing I want to show here is how this storm moves in. As it moves in, it's going to almost happen in two waves. The first wave, again, was mostly for Northern California. And you can see that on this map where you can think of this as representing storm energy. Most of that goes right through Northern California before moving off. Now, as the rest of this storm, that overall cutoff low starts to move over California, you can actually see exactly what we were talking about earlier. Where those lines are closer together, that's where you get more storm energy. So I think the second part of this system is mostly going to be bringing the intense storm factors to Southern California, things like 40 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts, while the rest of California, I think it's just going to be a more light to moderate but stretched out storm. So that's what's going on with the energy right there as that system moves off and then moves into the center of the country. So I want to actually look at those two waves as it comes through. You can see it started yesterday, bringing some light rain and snow to Northern California. And then let's go to right about now, it's going to start again. It's almost the second wave of this storm coming through. It looks like it eased up early this morning, and then it's going to start to get more widespread within the next hour or two in Northern California. And then as we get from 10 a.m. this morning to about 4 p.m. on Tuesday, that's where we get some of those more moderate rainfall and moderate snowfall building in. Again, it doesn't look heavy, it doesn't look extreme by any standards, but it falls for a long period of time. That's all the way from 10 a.m. Tuesday, clicking all the way through to about 4 a.m. on Thursday. So although there's no periods where it looks extreme, we're going to be able to pick it up for a long period of time. And I would say the bulk of the storm looks to be about 4 p.m. today or about 4 a.m. on Wednesday. When we look at the precip, a closer view at the coast here, you can see it's a very narrow strip along the coast where we're able to pick up half an inch to an inch of rain. Looks like Santa Rosa is getting 0.8 inches, San Francisco getting an inch. So that's some good news there along the coast, and especially up here in the North Bay, which is one of our key fire danger places. It looks like there's a large area in the North Bay that's getting at least a half an inch of rain, which is some good news when it comes to fire danger. Then when it comes to snowfall, take a look at the very northern parts of California. That's where there's that one little bullseye there where we could get 2 feet of snow, and then throughout the Sierras, it's looking like a foot and a half. So while there's not all that much rain coming in, I'm actually more excited for the snowfall because, again, that's what really affects our moisture and water in the future as all that snowfall starts to melt throughout the spring. So overall, that's looking better than some of the previous forecast model runs. Again, this is one of the things models aren't the best at predicting, the perfect amount of snowfall that's going to fall, so we will be staying updated with that. Now, as we go down into SoCal, you can see that's going to start a little later, and it makes sense because remember that cutoff low was moving from north to south through California. So as it moves through, it's going to start to bring some rain to the central coast about 10 p.m. on Tuesday, and then about 4 a.m. on Wednesday is when some of that more moderate rainfall and moderate snowfall fills into central and southern California. Now, this is one thing that the model has actually been fairly confident on since the very beginning. I think we first started looking at the storm maybe Tuesday last week, and it seems like every single model run has 4 a.m. Wednesday as the key part of this storm for Southern California. You can see that's still showing up as the key part of the storm. So that's going to be the time I'm watching the most closely. After that, we just get scattered light rain, light snow throughout Southern California until looks like we're still getting scattered light rain till about Saturday at 10 a.m. is when we're finally in the clear again. So there's the bulk coming in at 4 a.m. Wednesday, and then it looks like it's just light scattered rain and snow after that. Looking at precipitation, this is great to see stretching down through the central coast. We're getting a half an inch to an inch along the coast. And then it's especially great to see down here in Southern California, where Los Angeles expected to get an inch, down to San Diego, where we're expected to get an inch and a half. Again, that's not the place where we're in the worst drought in California, but that is a place where the fuels are extremely dry. So it's great to see some of that moisture building in. Now, one other thing that is actually kind of surprising for Southern California is the snowfall totals are actually larger than what some of the previous forecast model runs have shown. There's now this bullseye right here that's expected to get a foot, foot and a half, possibly, I'm hesitant to say 2 feet of snow because that's such a small area right there that's getting it. But that's more snow than some of the previous model runs have shown. So that tells you that that's one of the areas in California where the majority of the storm is coming in, and it tells you that some of our temperatures are going to be cold as this storm comes in. One other factor of this storm that we need to keep our eye on, because this is part of the warnings right now, are the high wind warnings that are already in effect. We have 31 mile per hour winds, 45 mile per hour wind gusts throughout Southern California, and that's what's causing the high wind warning. Those seem to ease up as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, and then as the bulk of that storm goes through, it actually looks like the winds aren't as big of a factor. It looks like if we click through here, the winds are already starting right now, and then into Tuesday afternoon, into tonight, into tomorrow is when those 35 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts persist over southern parts of California. You can see those high wind warnings here on the warnings map, along with that winter storm warning stretching all the way from NorCal to SoCal. So then you can also see it's almost like a connect the dots of the path this storm is going to take. It goes through California and then it moves into the central parts of the country. Now that part up here, that's bringing the winter storm warning to Wyoming. That is due to the first little blast of the system that came through very NorCal yesterday. The red flag warning and the high wind warnings you see here in Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, that is this overall major system that's starting to build in. So I actually want to talk about this red flag warning first, because that's what's in the near forecast. It's the fire danger that's actually going to be out in front of this storm, because the first part of the storm to move in is the extreme winds. Then afterwards, once that moisture is starting to flow in from the Gulf of Mexico, that's where we're getting heavy rain, heavy snow, so the fire threat should leave. But before that moisture arrives, we do have that red flag warning in place, so it's important to go over some of the factors that are causing that. The key factor there's 2 key factors that are causing that fire threat. One, it's the dry air. You can see a lot of the humidities over that key spot in New Mexico, Texas, even into Colorado and Oklahoma. It's a lot of dry air, and that's going to continue throughout this afternoon and into this evening, and then even into parts of Wednesday and even Thursday before that moisture starts to flow in. As we click farther into this map, that's where the storm has settled in over the center part of the country. Remember, that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's where that moisture moves in and the fire threat should be gone. But as you can see, for the next 3 days, it's looking rather dry in that area. And the key thing that makes relative humidity important is because if the air is dry, the fuels get dry. And you think of that. If the air is dry, it's just sucking the moisture out of the fuels, whereas when the air is moist, it can actually add some of that moisture into the fuels. Looking at the fuel moisture map, you can see that that area around New Mexico, Texas, Colorado, Oklahoma, and Kansas is already one of the drier parts in the entire country when we're talking about fuel moisture. So that continued dry air over the next few days is just going to continue to dry things out even more there. So The air is dry, the fuels are dry, but I think the big factor is actually the winds that are associated with this storm as it first starts to move into the region. You can see as early as tonight into early Wednesday morning, we start to get those 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts there in New Mexico and Texas. That's unfortunately going to be sticking around, and it appears getting even more widespread over the next couple of days, as large parts of New Mexico still 45 mile per hour wind gusts, and then up into Kansas and Missouri, we have 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts up there. So I think that's actually the bigger part of this fire danger threat, because you think if any little spark happens and you have 50 mile per hour wind gusts, it has the potential to spread a fire rather fast, and it can cause spotting where it picks up burning leaves and embers, tosses them ahead of the fire, causes new little fires. That's why winds are one of the key things to look at when assessing fire danger. So all of that combined, the dry air, dry fuels, it's relatively warm temperatures as of right now before that cold air gets pulled in, wind gusts 45 to 50 miles per hour. You can see right in that bullseye where we had a lot of those factors combining is where we have very high to extreme fire danger. Right in that area from northeast New Mexico, northern parts of Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Colorado. That's where the fire threat, for the most part, is located. Also down here in Arizona. Not going to cover that right now because I only figured I had time to cover one, and that looks to be the more extreme of the two. So that's what's going on with that red flag warning that we have in place. But the bigger part of the story is actually what's happening after that. After you see this giant trough build into the west, turn into a cutoff low, move into the center of the country. So right about there, that's the key spot to think about when assessing the middle of the country here. That's where it's bringing this moisture in from the Gulf of Mexico, bringing that cold air down, and that's what's going to cause the heavy rainfall throughout places like Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas, and then the heavy snowfall throughout places like Colorado, Nebraska, and Wyoming. Now, one thing to notice as I click through here, it starts to move in Friday, Saturday, and then Sunday, and you'll notice how slow moving it is. It doesn't look like it's gone until Tuesday, and then even after that, it looks to be getting reabsorbed into another system that dips down into the same area. So it's a very slow moving storm, which is what is allowing the totals to add up as much as they are. So the first little blast, the one that's going through Wyoming today, not going to spend too much time on that because that's just bringing some light snow, and most of that's up into the Midwest, and we will take a look at those Midwest totals. What I'm more interested in is this system as it starts to move in the center of the country. Right as early as Friday, you can start to see that snow showing up there on the map, and then the rain starting to show up down here in the areas closer to the Gulf of Mexico, where you can actually see some of that moisture being streamed in. You can think of these lines of constant pressure there. You can think of those almost like little pathways for this moisture to follow up into this system. So then right about Saturday morning is when you notice this start to really strengthen and become what I think will be a major storm. That's where we're getting heavy snow throughout Colorado and heavy rain throughout Oklahoma, Kansas, and then you'll watch as it continues and continues all the way into Monday. So this is going to be what I think is a rather major storm throughout this weekend. Looks like it starts to strengthen early Saturday morning. Large amounts of snowfall and rainfall falling throughout the day Saturday into Sunday before it finally moves off into the Midwest. And then, like I said, it looks to actually be getting reabsorbed into another system, but that's a ways off in the forecast. We'll save that for next week's forecast. So looking at this, there's that first little blast of the system that for the most part goes up into the Midwest. We are going to be getting some snow in parts of Colorado and Nebraska with that one. What I'm more interested in, though, is the second part of the system. So getting into Friday, one thing you'll notice is throughout this week, there are areas of Colorado that are just slowly adding on to their totals with that light snowfall. Then as we get into Friday, you can see almost the two parts of the system trying to combine into one. They're just dancing around each other. We have that snow in Colorado, the heavy rain down here in Oklahoma and Missouri, and then eventually they combine. And once that combines, that's where the storm really starts to strengthen. That's where we start getting heavier snowfall throughout Colorado, and then some heavier rainfall throughout places like Oklahoma, Kansas, working into parts of Arkansas and Missouri as well, throughout Saturday, Sunday, and then even into Monday before that system finally moves off as we get into Tuesday. So just clicking through that again because it's pretty interesting. You see it slowly forming, then it forms, brings that heavy rain and snow. That rain, I think, is going to be one of the big factors of this storm because there are some locations expected to get maybe 4 or 5 inches. And then that heavy snow, where those locations that are able to pick up this snow for 4 or 5 days, that's where some of our totals are going to be rather large, as you'll see in a second. First, I just want to show where that heaviest amount of rainfall is. You can see parts of Kansas, large portions of the state getting an inch or 2 of rain, and then even large portions of the state getting 3 inches, with one bullseye getting 5 inches. Similar story down here for Oklahoma, where we have numerous locations getting into that 2 to 3 to even 4 inch range, as well as Missouri and Arkansas. So again, that's where all that moisture is flowing in from the Gulf of Mexico, but our temperatures are too warm to be getting snow, so instead we're getting large amounts of rainfall. As of right now, the warnings map don't have any flood or don't have widespread flood warnings over this region, but that's because this isn't full force until about Saturday or Sunday, so we're going to have to stay tuned to see what happens there. When it comes to the snowfall, there you can see some of that light snow we're picking up as that first system goes through. It's not exactly light. There are some places getting 4 to 8 inches of snow just with that one. It just seems like when you compare it with the overall large storm that's coming in after that. So that's where the system just sits over the region, parts of Wyoming, Nebraska, into Colorado. I'd say at this point it's safe to say there's going to be large portions of these states that are getting 1.5 feet, and then you might even be able to stretch it to say there are some portions, especially of Nebraska into Wyoming, that could be getting 2 to 3 feet of snow. And then also up here in northeastern Colorado, looks like there's some areas that could be getting 2 feet of snow as well. So that almost paints a picture of that dividing line where you're going to be getting that snowfall and where you're going to be getting that heavy rain. So that's something I want to focus on, where we're going to be getting the heaviest rain. I'd say a good spot to focus would be Oklahoma. And then where we're getting that heavy snow, I'd say a good spot to focus would be Colorado. Now, before we get into the local, let's just look at the overall mechanism that's driving this. So this is looking at Saturday. As this storm is starting to move in, you're going to start to see it move right above Texas here into Oklahoma, parts of Kansas, and you can perfectly see how this is working out. If hopefully you can see the wind streams on your screen here, all that wind is pulling all this moisture and warm air into this low pressure system. You can actually see it by the colors, where you have on the left side here, where that would be your cold front, you have temperatures in the 50s. On the right side, you're in the 60s and even the 70s. And that's that warm air being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico. Then on the left side of the low, it's counterclockwise. So on the left side, you're pulling air down from some of your colder states like Wyoming and Montana. That's where that cold air below freezing and at some points even into the teens sits over Colorado. That's why our snowfall totals are going to be so large throughout these states where we see that cold air persisting. So one other way to look at that was looking at the temperature aspect of this storm as it moves in, bringing the warm air in from the south, which allows that rainfall for Oklahoma and Missouri, then the cold air down from Montana, bringing that cold air into Colorado, which allows the snowfall for Colorado. The other way to look at this is with regards to humidity. So if we go back to Friday, again, there you can see all that dry air that's sitting right over where we have that red flag warning. But then as that storm continues to fill in into Saturday, you can actually see all that moisture being pulled into this system. right about there. I think it shows it perfectly. There's the low, and you can see these winds pull. Think of it just picking up some moisture for here from the Gulf of Mexico, bringing it into this low, and then where that low combines with the cold air, that's where that moisture just gets squeezed out as either rainfall or snowfall. In Colorado, it's going to be falling as snowfall. So there's the first little blast that's going to be coming in between 5 p.m. and 11 p.m. today, bringing some light snowfall to large portions of the state. And then you're continuing to pick up light snowfall all the way through Wednesday into Thursday into Friday. But that's not even the real system that's coming in. The real system seems to be showing up about 5 a.m. on Saturday. This is when that low has just solidified over your location. It's starting to really pull in some of that moisture that we're just looking at here, starting to pull down some of that cold air. And that's where some more moderate snowfall starts to come in. Where we start to see some heavy snowfall is throughout the day, Saturday into even Sunday, where northeastern parts of the state especially look to be picking up some heavier snowfall rates. And then we're clicking all the way into Monday and Tuesday now, and that's when that system is finally gone. So you notice you're starting to pick up some snow right now, and then it's actually going to pick up Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you're still picking up snow this time next week. So that's what's going to allow your totals to be so large. So this is just some of the light snow that you're picking up all the way into Friday before the real system even comes in. You can see there are still some areas that are getting 4 to even 8 inches of snow just with the light snow we're picking up over the next few days. When the real system comes in, that's where your totals start to get rather large. Majority of the state is at least 6 inches of snow. Large portions are above a foot. And where we saw that heaviest snow in the northeastern parts of the state, that's where we're over 2 feet of snow. Again, this is a little ways off in the forecast. A lot of this snow is falling Saturday and Sunday, so this forecast will change. The question is how it will change. As of right now, the trend is actually going towards more snowfall. This is more snowfall than we were looking at yesterday. We'll see if that trend continues, and we'll see what happens with the Colorado snowfall throughout future forecast videos. Now, for the rainfall, I want to focus on Oklahoma working into Texas here. A lot of that rain starts to show up at a similar time to when some of that heavier snow started building into Colorado. Getting into 12 a.m. Saturday, that's where some of that heavy rain, where you see those yellows and oranges, that's where you're above 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour of rain. Wherever you see rain that strong, that's where you start to get some danger for some flood threats. And you can see that's going to continue all the way through Friday into Saturday, and then form an organized strip where that's that cold front flowing down off the southern end of the low. That is just going to move through Oklahoma throughout the day Sunday. It looks like it starts to form 7 a.m. Sunday, then moves through the state 1 p.m. Sunday, and then it's gone by Sunday night. That is going to be a key area where we're going to have to look out for some, I think, severe weather, some thunderstorms, and then possibly some flooding. So looking at the precip map, you can see it starts to come in just as some light rainfall. By Saturday, you've picked up maybe an inch in some locations, but not all that much. The bulk of this storm, though, comes in Saturday and Sunday as that larger, heavier rainfall appears to stay over the state. That's where some of your totals get into the 3-inch range to possibly even the 4 to 5-inch range up here in northern Oklahoma. So there aren't any flood warnings yet on the map, but I'm certainly going to keep my eye on that, especially on our forecast on Friday. That's going to be the key thing I think I'll be looking at when it comes to the warmer states where we're getting that rainfall in Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. So once again, just following the storm as it goes through. Now let's follow it all the way up into the Midwest. So the first thing to look at here is there's actually 2 little systems going up into the Midwest. One, you're going to see this little bump in this trough just almost ripple like a wave up into the Midwest. That is actually going to bring some snow to Minnesota throughout the day. And then the larger system slowly moves into the center of the country before moving up into the Midwest on Monday into Tuesday. Now, where the forecast model has changed is in the past, this was moving straight through the Midwest, and it appeared to be bringing some larger snowfall totals to Minnesota and and Wisconsin. Now, it looks like that's actually, for the most part, going to be reabsorbed into this next system that we'll be following throughout next week. So, one other thing to point out on that map is the large ridge that is currently over the Midwest. A very large ridge before this trough moves in. And what that's doing is causing 25 to 30 degree above average temperatures throughout North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and large portions of the Midwest as well. That's where there are some areas where we're even 40 degrees above average. So what that's going to do is determine who picks up snowfall and when. At this point, this is when that first system is really starting to move through. That's where Minnesota is actually able to get some snow because it's just mild temperatures, whereas Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, parts of Michigan are 25 to 30 degrees above average, so there's no chance they're getting snow as that first system goes through. Then with the next one, this is where things get rather interesting. Getting into Sunday, as that system, you can see it's right above Kansas there based on that cold front and warm front coming off of it and all that cold air it's pulling down into Colorado. You'll notice that much of the Midwest at this point is again 20 to 25 degrees above average. And the reason for that is as we move to this point in this map, you have that giant cutoff low sitting here dropping 2 feet of snow on Colorado, but there's still a large ridge over almost all of the Midwest. It's a very interesting weather pattern to look at here, where there's a large ridge over much of the country and then just this bullseye of a storm system right in the middle of it. So what that's allowing is those warm temperatures to remain over the Midwest, which again affects your snowfall totals. So that almost perfectly matches right there. Where the storm is, we have some of that cold air, but where the overarching ridge is, we're 25 degrees above average. So that is going to determine who gets snowfall when that storm finally does work its way up into the Midwest. As of right now, it's looking like it's going to be pretty warm up there. So I'd be surprised if anybody's picking up too much snow as that comes through. So here's the first little system. That's bringing some snow again to parts of Minnesota throughout the day Thursday. And you can see where that strip is. It almost perfectly matches what we were looking at earlier, where large areas of Wisconsin and the rest of the Midwest are 25 to 30 degrees above average. So they're just getting rain with that first system. When the second one comes in, this is going to be the interesting one because this is where it looked like there were large portions that were still warm. But as it moves through, it looks like Minnesota, Wisconsin, we'll be getting some light snow. It doesn't look like anything extreme. Where we actually start to get the heaviest snowfall is here in Michigan on Tuesday. That's a big change from what yesterday's model was showing, and I think the reason for that is this low is moving a little bit farther over Illinois at this point, which means it's going to be able to bring some cold air over from the northeast into Michigan to allow some of that snowfall to happen. That's something that was not on the forecast yesterday, but appears to be in the forecast now. Yesterday, that part of Michigan wasn't getting anything. Now it looks like they might be getting the most snow with that second system as it moves through. So there's the first strip. You can see right where that dividing line is, where the majority of the Midwest is just going to be getting rain, but we could be getting 4 to 6 inches throughout Minnesota. When the second system moves through, it's a little more widespread, and again, you see that bullseye is here in Michigan. That's an area where yesterday's forecast didn't have any snow, and now they have 6 to 8 inches, while yesterday we were expecting to pile on more snow into Minnesota and Wisconsin with that second system, but as of right now, it looks like Wisconsin may be able to pick up an inch to 3 inches with that second wave, whereas Minnesota doesn't actually look to be adding all that much on to their totals, maybe just an inch up here and an inch or two down in the southern parts of the state. So let's actually look at this on the windy map. I think this is the best way to look at storms as they come through. There is a just perfect picture to illustrate what we've been talking about. There's that low as it moves through. Where you see the blue color, that's where you're below freezing. That's where you can see these winds pulling the cold temperatures down from Canada into Minnesota. So that's where we're getting that strip of snowfall as this low moves through Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. You notice the rest of the Midwest, though, especially on the other side of this cold front, is where we're mid-50s to even 60-degree temperatures as late as 10 p.m. at night. So that continues to move through. And then the next one appears to be coming in at the start of next week. So let's see if we can identify when that next low starts to move into the Midwest. Map's going a little bit slow right now because I do have about 60 tabs open. Let's see if there it starts to show up on the bottom of the screen here. If the map can cooperate, maybe it'll work a little better if I'm not clicking it as fast as I am. So there's that low as it starts to show up. And you'll notice, I think that's the key spot to look at right there. That's where we're starting to bring some of that cold air from the northeast into Michigan, something that we weren't seeing yesterday. So that's where we're able to pick up that 6 to 8 inches of snow here in Michigan. You'll notice there is also some cold air being pulled down into Wisconsin and Minnesota, so that's where we're able to get an inch or two of snow. But on this right side here, that's where we're combining that cold air with some of that moisture that's continuing to be pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico. I haven't actually checked this, but you can actually see how that works. You can see that moisture flowing all the way from the Gulf of Mexico right into Michigan, combining with those cold temperatures to bring that 6 to 8 inches of snow in that area. So let's take a look at Minnesota because that's, I think, the key spot to watch for the first part of this system. Right about, it starts as rain 12 p.m. Wednesday, and then 6 p.m. Wednesday is where we start to see that divide between the snow and the rain, depending on if you're below freezing or above freezing. And then some of the heaviest snow starts to come in 12 a.m. on Thursday. And then that moves out. Let's look at the next system as it comes through. Should just be some light snow. Yeah, it just looks like light snow starting at about 7 a.m. Monday, moving throughout the day Monday into Tuesday. We're just getting that light strip of snow going through Minnesota and Wisconsin. So looking at the snowfall totals, there's that first strip where we're able to get maybe 6 to possibly even 8 inches in some of the higher areas, but 2 to 4 inches in this overall strip right here. Then as that second system moves through, which is more widespread but doesn't look as intense, that's where we're just getting maybe 1 to 2 inches of snow throughout much of Wisconsin and the majority of Minnesota, adding another inch or two onto your totals. Now over here in Michigan, again, this is the interesting part of the forecast because this is what has changed so much from yesterday. Yesterday you were getting rainfall the entire time, and it looks like you're still getting rainfall as that first system moves through on Wednesday and Thursday. But then as the next system moves through, that's where things change. That's where you're actually able to pick up some of that cold air. And right about there, that looks like that's the first little traces of snow at about 2 a.m. on Tuesday. One thing to watch out for is that ice that looks to be building in at 2 a.m. on Tuesday. And then 8 a.m. on Tuesday is some of the heaviest snowfall we've seen in any map that we've looked at today, including the Sierras, including Colorado. That looks to be the heaviest snowfall rates where we're getting above 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour throughout Michigan. Again, parts of the southern parts of the state are still above freezing, so they're just getting rainfall. But where that cold air is being pulled in from the northeast, that's where we have this bullseye of heavy snowfall on 8 a.m. Tuesday. And then that system moves on out. So let's look at the snowfall that we're going to pick up. Again, with that entire first system, it's all rainfall. Barely any snowfall at all. Maybe a couple flecks of snow. I think that's a word, flecks. Of snow up there in the northern parts of the state. Then as that next one comes through, that's where we're getting maybe 6 to 8 inches of snow throughout much of northern Michigan in an area that wasn't expected to get any snow yesterday. So that alone might be a testament or evidence as to why it's so important to look at the weather models every single day, which is part of the reason I do these videos. It's fun to see how the forecast models change, and you have to stay up up to date with them until the actual event happens. Because the closer you get to the actual event, the higher confidence the models get and the more accurate they become. So as of right now, this is still a ways off in the forecast. Guaranteed that's going to change. The question is how it will change. So that was a lot to talk about. I'll try to sum it up here in just a quick forecast summary. We basically followed the same storm as it moves across the country. The first thing it does is move into California, bringing widespread rain and snow. Overall, doesn't look like a major storm by any standards. It's not an atmospheric river. We're not going to be getting 10 inches of rain or 10 feet of snow like we did with that one storm earlier this year. But it is something. California is in a drought. I'm already starting to think about fire danger. So even though it's not a massive storm, it's at least good to see some of that rain and snow returning to the Golden State. That's going to be continuing throughout what should be the rest of this week before it moves into the center of the country. When it moves to the center of the country, that's where it's able to almost refuel its moisture. On the west, when it hits California, that's dropping all the Pacific moisture. Then it runs out, and then it starts to bring in some more from the Gulf of Mexico. That's where it starts to bring some heavy snowfall to parts of Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado. Snowfall trends are actually getting larger in that area. It looks like now we're expected to have widespread areas getting 1.5 feet, maybe even 2 feet. There were some locations getting 3 feet of snow. I'm hesitant to emphasize that too far out in the forecast, but I'd say it's safe to say this is going to end up being a major snowstorm for those colder states where the cold air is being brought down. Where the warm air and moisture is being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico, though, that's where we're going to be getting some heavy rain. There are some states expected to get maybe 3 to 4 inches of rain, possibly some thunderstorms, some severe weather. So one of the key things I'm going to be watching out for is if any flood threats pop up and where they might be, because there is going to be some heavy rainfall as that storm just sits over the center of the country, what looks to be throughout the entire weekend, dropping heavy snow where it's colder, heavy rain where it's warmer. Then eventually, that's going to move up into the Midwest, and it looks like it's going to bring maybe 6 to 8 inches of snow to Michigan, while it continues to spread out heavy rain throughout the southeast. So that's what we're most likely going to be following for the entire rest of the week. It's a very slow-moving storm, so that's basically going to be driving the weather we're talking about for this entire week. One snapshot at possibly the most important thing to look at each day, the warnings map. We got those winter storm warnings stretching through California, some high wind warnings where the storm is a bit stronger. Then as that storm first moves into the center of the country, before the precipitation and rainfall can move in, we're actually going to have wildfire threat. There's these red flag warnings in Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado. That's because we're getting some 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts mixed with actually some dry air. Relative humidity is around 10%. So there is a fire threat right there before the bulk of the system just parks itself over the center of the country and starts to really bring in that moisture. Once it brings in the moisture, the fire threat should disappear, or hopefully will disappear, and then instead we'll have to start thinking about that heavy snowfall and heavy rainfall. So I think the key thing I'm going to be looking at in future forecast videos is those winter storm warnings that I'm expecting will start to pop up here in Colorado and Nebraska, and then possibly some flood warnings throughout Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Arkansas. That'll all be future forecast videos though. I think that just about wraps it up for today. Hopefully this video was helpful. Hope you all have a great day, and thank you for watching.